Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about what makes a really good body paragraph essay. And we've spoken a lot about this in class, so as everything that we've been doing for the past month, nothing I'm going to say is brand new information. However, it's always good to remind ourselves of these things, and it's always good to keep going, keep building, keep getting even better when it comes to our essay writing. Now for today's video, I'm going to be utilizing the ATAR notes book that you have all got from the library. And the reason why I'm doing so is because I absolutely love the essays that are in the back of this book, and I think that they are a really great source of inspiration for your writing. Now, by no means am I saying that this is the only way to write. By no means am I saying that your writing has to be of this level. This is obviously a very, very high standard, but it is written by somebody just after they finished year 12, so I think that's good to note. As always, I don't think that this exam is created in a way that it would be beneficial for you to be memorizing these essays, and it's always going to be the most beneficial for you to write your own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the topic that this essay is written on, and that is: the landscape in Hannah Kent's Burial Rites is more than just a setting. To what extent do you agree? So I really recommend pausing this video and planning a response to that. Make a thesis statement, plan some arguments, do some brainstorming, write an essay if you would like, do something with that question, and then come back and we'll talk about the body paragraphs. What I would also recommend doing is pausing the video and having a read of the introduction. I'm not going to use the introduction today, but it might be helpful for you with some context to know exactly how this essay was introduced. Okay, so I'm going to place body paragraph 1 on the screen here, and I'm going to read through it and kind of make a note as we go as to why this is such a strong body paragraph and what sorts of things this writer has done to enable them to write successfully. I'm going to pay particular attention to cohesion because I feel like I have mentioned cohesive devices in my feedback to a lot of you, and I think it's something that we can definitely all benefit from some refreshing with, I suppose. Now, just a disclaimer, I didn't write this, I don't take credit for this, and if you are watching this and you aren't my student for some reason, I recommend buying this. It's written by ATAR Notes, all about burial rites. I give full credit to them, they're the best. Varying settings in burial rites are crucial in understanding how Agnes's physical and social landscape shaped her into adulthood. Kent illustrates that Agnes is accustomed to coping with pain and death, even as a child, and desensitized to constantly moving around in search of employment, having always lived farm to farm. The formidability and turbulence of the landscape prevails more often than the fleeting moments of beauty and comfort, foretelling the unpredictability and cruelty Agnes must face throughout her life. The first example of this is the night of her foster mother Inga's death, which Agnes describes as a storm that hurls ice at their home, and likens the force of the weather to a goal demanding to enter, a metaphor for the antagonistic real world outside, just beyond the horizon of the future, waiting to strip her of love and a sense of belonging. Furthermore, though Inga ostensibly died giving birth without medical aid and attention, it was the storm that prevented Agnes or her stepfather from seeking this help, and thus Agnes is forced to learn from a young age how dangerous the Icelandic climate can be, and also how the weather and landscape are inseparably tied to the fates of those who live amongst them. To this end, readers observe the external environment as exerting significant influence over the lives of the characters in the novel, and though it lacks the logical motivations of the other figures in the text, it is undoubtedly a powerful and inescapable reality that charges the plot. It would be helpful for me to annotate this paragraph and to show you exactly what it is that this writer is doing that is working really well. Now, as we know with our ATAR notes, they will give us bits on the side that show us their annotations, which I think is really helpful. I'm going to add to that by showing you some things that I think are great as well. Now, we know that we need to start off with a topic sentence. So I'm going to highlight the topic sentence here. So this topic sentence reads: the varying settings in burial rites are crucial in understanding how Agnes's physical and social landscape shaped her into adulthood. Now, their note on the side there says this alternate interpretation of landscapes adds another dimension to the discussion. So obviously, if we read the whole essay, and you will read the whole essay because I've said it's a good idea, you'll see what they mean by saying this. Comes to a strong topic sentence. We know that it has to set our writing up for success. So it has to exist in a way that's going to make the paragraph establish the tone for the writing. And this topic sentence does just that. A good topic sentence is also going to tell me what the paragraph's going to be about. It's not going to be vague. It's not going to mention anything that's not relevant to this paragraph. So when I read this topic sentence, I read that it's the varying settings that shape Agnes into who she is as an adult. And that's what the whole paragraph's going to be about. Now that I've read the paragraph, I know that's exactly what happens. So this topic sentence has met its purpose. It's doing exactly what it needs to set a piece of this paragraph up to be a really strong example of analytical writing. Now, the next thing that we do, we typically then go on to explain this a little bit further. So I'm going to highlight where I can see that in this paragraph. Okay, Ken illustrates that Agnes is accustomed to coping with pain and death, even as a child, and desensitized to constantly moving around in search of employment, having always lived farm to farm. So this explains exactly what is going on in this paragraph, okay? So we've got a really good verb there that is analyzing the author's intention. So illustrates is a great word to use in your writing. But what it's doing here is it's establishing a little bit more information. I'm getting a bit more context as to what this writer's point is. There is a quote there that is quite strong. It's not a quote that's proving the point of the paragraph because we're still only in that explaining state. But what it's doing is it's allowing me to see that this person knows what they're talking about. The formidability and turbulence of the landscape prevails more often than the fleeting moments of the beauty and comfort, foretelling the unpredictability and cruelty Agnes must face throughout her life. Now, we have another note here from the book, and it says, much of the analysis of structural features like the setting and the text symbols require using associations with these to identify the meaning encoded within parts of the novel. It is not enough to simply note that the landscape symbolizes loneliness. We have to explain how and why it's a symbol. How and why a symbol represents a certain idea by drawing connections between textual elements. This is basically just how I always say, make sure you're answering the how and the why, and make sure you're linking it to your thesis. So whilst this student has made a really good point here, they need to go on and provide evidence and then analyze that evidence, which we know. But it's a really good, I'm glad that they pointed it out because whilst they've made a good point, there's more needed here. And that's good because it's not the end of the paragraph yet. They're going to continue on and do that. So now we've got some evidence. I'm going to highlight that for us. The first example of this is the night of her foster mother Inga's death, which Agnes describes as a storm that hurls ice at their home. Now, obviously we can see here that this writer has had to manipulate the quote to make it fit, so they've popped that into brackets so that we can see the changes that they've made in order to make it flow. And likens the force of the weather to a antagonistic real world outside. So here we've got this student and they are starting to look at some aesthetic features and stylistic devices throughout their evidence, which we know we have to do. Waiting to strip her of love and sense of belonging. Evidence is the best possible evidence to prove what the paragraph's going to be about. We're going to scroll up and remind ourselves that it's the settings that shape her into adulthood, okay? So this student is saying the setting of the place in which Inga passed away is shaped Agnes into who she is. Now, if I just say that and I give that piece of evidence, I'm going to think, well, how? What is it about the setting? For me, initially, I would have thought, well, isn't it the act of what happened? What's it got to do with where it happened? But the student then goes on to analyze that. So you can see here, they have said, furthermore, though Inga ostensibly died giving birth without medical aid and attention, it was the storm that prevented Agnes or her stepfather from seeking help. And thus Agnes is forced to learn from a young age how dangerous the Icelandic climate can be, and how the weather and landscape are inseparably tied to the fates of those who lived amongst them. So that analysis is really strong. They've made such a good point and they've really proved it, which is exactly what we want to see. Now, of course, once we get to the end of the paragraph, if I zoom out a little bit, we can see we've ticked all of the boxes so far. We've got a really strong topic sentence. We've explained that topic sentence. We've given some evidence from the novel, including a technique. So that's why when we use a petal paragraph, we call it the letter T because we need to pop techniques in there. Then we've got that analysis, which is really good. So the only thing left to do now is to conclude our writing. And we know that when we conclude, we need to make sure that we are linking to our thesis statement and linking everything together. But ultimately, we're drawing those conclusions and making sure that it's really nice and clear for our reader. To this end, which is a great cohesive device to start a concluding sentence with, Readers observe the external environment as exerting significant influence over the lives of the characters in the novel, and though it lacks the logical motivations of the other figures in the text, it is undoubtedly a powerful and inescapable reality that charges the plot. So after reading that, I understand what the student is saying. They've made a great point, and ultimately they've proved that point and proved that they really understand what it is that they are saying. Now, we know our writing has to look at certain things. So we know, because we've used the same ISMG the whole time, and we know that this is reflected in the EAMG, but also in the syllabus objectives, we know that we need to look at the following. We know that we need to look at all of these things here. Now, we're not going to be able to talk about every single one of these in every single one of our paragraphs. And we also know that we don't need to be identifying something as an aesthetic feature or as a stylistic device, but rather we just need to identify a metaphor rather than saying the aesthetic feature of a metaphor kind of thing. But these are the sorts of things we're looking for. Now, I'm just going to make a little checklist to see if this student has written about all of those sorts of things. So have they mentioned identities? Yes, because they talk about Agnes and her identity and her transition to adulthood as well, which is quite a strong example of analysing that identity. In terms of times, they certainly haven't explicitly looked at the times. However, we know that if this was set in 2021, they would have been able to seek medical attention when Inga was going into labour, but rather the time and the place ultimately impacted that. Now, obviously, place is explicitly looked at, and the point of this paragraph is the landscape, but it's still linked in there as well, but definitely looking at place. In terms of concepts, this student looks at belonging. So at the very end of the orange bit here, it says future, waiting to strip her of love and a sense of belonging. So love and belonging are looked at there. Aesthetic features we definitely look at because we're looking at a metaphor. Stylistic devices, definitely. Now, in terms of our attitudes, values, beliefs, and cultural assumptions, when we don't see these being explicitly looked at. However, in the explanation part of this paragraph, it says Agnes is accustomed to coping with pain and death, even as a child, and desensitized to constantly moving around. So that tells me a little bit about her attitude there. So hopefully you can see that this paragraph has done a lot and it's done it really, really well. Let's have a look at the second paragraph. Okay, so hopefully after going through the paragraph, you are able to see exactly what it is that makes it so strong and why it is such a good example of writing. What I want to show you now is the second body paragraph in this essay. I'm not going to read the third body paragraph and I'm not going to read the conclusion. I really recommend that you do, but I just want to show you how the student is able to maintain that cohesion and that analysis into another paragraph that's done a little bit differently, but still in a very successful kind of way. So body paragraph 2. Having experienced such a bleak and turbulent childhood, it is no wonder Agnes becomes allured by the dark romanticism of Natan, who allowed her to bloom and offered her an existence above the life of mud and struggle. Unfortunately, Agnes's retelling of her time at Ilaugusta reveals that it merely presented her with an unfamiliar environment, the sparse and grey northern Icelandic peninsula. Left to the manipulative whims of the abusive and volatile nature of Natan, changeable as the ocean, Agnes is depicted by Kent as being utterly isolated at Ilaugusta, where only the outlying tongues of rock scarred the perfect kiss of sea and sky. There was no one and nothing else. Kent infers Agnes descends into a state of depression and disorientation during this time of abandonment and estrangement, the barren landscape and icy weather used as a pathetic fallacy that is reflective of her unreciprocated emotions. A tangible sense of Agnes's fragility and vulnerability, plus the tragedy of her unfulfilled yearning for Natan and his acceptance, are equally conveyed through Kent's crisp descriptions of the landscapes in which Agnes has lived. Hence, Kent enables readers to gain empathetic insight into Agnes's conflicted mental state as she overcomes her emotions and achieves spiritual salvation, at least on a personal level, prior to her death. Okay, so I have just removed my face for this section because I've realized it doesn't really need to be there at all. It doesn't add anything. What I'm gonna do is, just like the last time, I'm going to go through and make a note of each part of the paragraph, but I'm going to particularly pay attention to the cohesive devices in this paragraph because that's what we want to focus on. Having experienced such a bleak and turbulent childhood, it is no wonder Agnes becomes allured by the dark romanticism of Natan, who allowed her to bloom and offered her an existence above the life of mud and struggle. So that's what this paragraph's going to be about. So it's setting the tone and the idea of the paragraph, which is really important. So the note on the side here says, when writing about the landscapes of the text, and remember to vary your discussion by examining different evidence. So don't write the whole novel off being set in a cold, unforgiving snowstorm. There is actually a great deal of subtle nuance in the way the external environment is depicted. So basically what this means is don't just keep saying the same thing. If this whole essay, because this whole essay is about the landscape, right? If you're going to write a whole essay about landscape, don't describe it the same way every single time. Just as if you were writing a whole paragraph, a whole essay about Agnes, you would refer to her as more than just a convicted murderess. There's multiple ways that you can refer to her. So we are demonstrating our understanding of the whole text by using lots of different descriptions. So our note on the side here, number 6, says, this is a small addition that can have a seriously big effect on your essay. Talk about the characters as depicted by the author rather than that they are real people. So Agnes is portrayed as struggling with mortality rather than Agnes struggles with her mortality. So we've spoken about this quite a lot in class, but we want to constantly refer to the novel as being written, right? So she is portrayed as rather than she does. Now, number 8 says, and this is quite firm, but it says if the essay prompt asks you to discuss the role of the landscape or setting, mentioning pathetic fallacy is almost a requirement. Now, it's not going to say in the EAMG talks about pathetic fallacy, but what they're saying here is it's a really good idea to use that terminology. Now, we spoke about pathetic fallacy a long time ago, so I'm just going to remind you of what it means. A pathetic fallacy is the attribution of human feelings and like human emotions and responses that are given to inanimate things like animals or objects and that kind of stuff. So as the landscape is reflecting feelings, we would refer to that as a pathetic fallacy. If that doesn't make sense, please let me know. And it's reflective of her unreciprocated emotions. We've noted where everything is there, and now I am just going to delete that all out so I can show you the cohesive devices. But I just wanted to make sure that you understood where each part. Now, in terms of cohesive devices, a cohesive device is basically just a fancy way of saying words or phrases that connect, really. Because cohesive devices exist with the sole purpose to make your work cohesive, which means to make it make sense. So it's any kind of word or phrase that allows your work to flow and connect. Some pretty popular examples of cohesive devices are your and, but, because we often see those in the middle of our sentences. However, in our writing, we're obviously going to need to do more than just connect things. Our writing needs to do lots of different things, and we have certain phrases that are going to allow us to quite consistently throughout this unit is our essay placemat. And I'm just going to place that on the screen here so that you are reminded as to what it looks like. And in this essay placemat, there is a little section, I'll zoom into it here, that says text connectives / cohesive devices. And these are some words and phrases that allow us to connect our work. And as you can see here, there are a couple of different things that you can do with these cohesive devices. Now, if you're somebody who is told that you need to ensure you are using concluding sentences, to conclude cohesive devices that I'm going to pop right here are going to help you out in making sure that you are concluding. So using words like consequently, as a result, therefore, right at the end of your paragraph is going to ensure that you are concluding. If you're told to make sure that there is a link between ideas, if it is an additional idea, so it's the same thing, your two ideas are saying the exact same thing, their point is the same, words such as equally, additionally, furthermore, likewise, are going to be really helpful to make sure that that is what you are doing. If you would like to say something that is the complete opposite, you could say something like conversely, even though, despite, whereas. If you are giving examples, so if you're trying to embed evidence, and I'm thinking of doing another video that focuses on this a little bit more, but if you are needing to make sure that it's obvious that you're giving an example, phrases such as to illustrate, for instance, to show, are going to help you here. Finally, if you're wanting to emphasize your main ideas, so if you're making a big point in your paragraph that you want to make sure that your reader really understands, phrases like ideally, undoubtedly, significantly, essentially, are going to really help you out here. Now, if we have a look at the paragraph that we have just read, I'm going to show you all of the cohesive devices in this piece of writing together there. Here, plus enables us to keep going with the idea there. Hence is a good example of a cohesive device. So this is quite a small paragraph, so there aren't too many examples, but you can see all throughout that you can see consistently there are words and phrases that allow the work to flow. So unfortunately, Kent infers, plus and hence are some of the strongest examples of cohesive devices in this paragraph. If we jump back to the first one, so even signposting by saying like the first example of this, and allows us to see. We've got furthermore, and thus, to this end. So again, we can see a couple of different devices through here that are going to allow the work to flow together. So you can see how the paragraphs are quite different. And what I want you to think about is which of those paragraphs you liked more and why. So evaluate the work because it's going to allow you to actively use it, right? So to understand exactly why these paragraphs are strong. Okay, so my next video is going to have a look at conclusions, and hopefully by then you will have seen examples of all parts of an essay and you will be feeling nice and confident in terms of your writing ability. Let me know if you have any questions, any concerns, or anything that you need ever. Any requests for videos? I am clearly having the time of my life here. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll see you so soon. Love you all very much. Bye!